Hey guys, so today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about the theme of our story that we read yesterday. So today you'll be working on your bell ringer. Then we'll just kind of review that plot story from yesterday. And then we're going to be analyzing the theme of the story before you guys will have a chance to do that on your own. So yesterday we talked about the story plot and remembering the 6 different parts of the story plot, 7 including the theme. So the exposition, just a reminder that hopefully you were able to find out that the setting of the story was taking place from uh, Odysseus and his men as they left Troy and are making their way back to Ithaca. Then there are a lot of things that kind of happen along their way. The most exciting part is probably when they find the abandoned island with lots of food after they have survived the storm. And then for the solution, they probably didn't necessarily solve the problem of making their way home. Again, this is only just a part of the story. So it didn't quite finish in the sense that eventually, yes, he does make it his way home, but he has not gotten that far yet. So even though, yes, the major problem of the story is he's trying to make his way home, the solution is that instead of going home, he got distracted again by trying to figure out what was in that cave. So the next part of the story is actually when he is on the island and he meets that monster. And the monster is also famously known as a cyclops. So again, this is some parts of the story that you will probably become more familiar with when you read different adaptations as you continue with English throughout your rest of your middle school career and your high school career. I actually think I do have a couple examples of this, so I might have to look for those when I am back in my classroom on Friday. All right, but anyways, back on track here. So that is kind of how the story plot went. I know I've looked through some of your story plots from yesterday, and they're looking very good. The universal theme. So we had to remember that the universal theme is something that is a message or an insight about the life that is expressed in the literature of art. So, in the book on page 460, this is where the example is coming from. It is saying that stories of Odysseus have been around in some form for thousands of years. So, again, this is something that Homer originally wrote back in the time of like the Greek gods. So it's been around for thousands of years. One reason they have lasted so long is that people still connect with their messages and their portrayals of human nature. In other words, their themes are universal. So even though this was written 1,000 years ago, I'm sure that we can relate to being distracted by things, right? 6th graders don't get distracted at all. A universal theme is a message or an insight about life that is expressed in the literature and art of all cultures and time periods. So, some examples of universal themes might be courage, it might be the power of love, or the danger of greed. So those would be some examples that you might come across that are some of those universal themes. They tend to be in a lot of different types of stories. The ancient version of the Odyssey is an epic, so it is a long poem. If you ever read the original, it is a very, very long one about heroes. So even though the version you read was adapted for our times, the universal theme still remains. So you can still see a lot of the courage, the power of love, or dangers of greed just within that short little part that they had for us in our textbook. So to find universal themes in the epic retelling, you had to focus on the main character. So think of Odysseus. Analyze any of the problems. So we know that the overall big problem of the Odyssey is that he is trying to make his way home. But along the way, he is coming across different problems. So those are the problems that you want to focus on. Kind of what are those problems that he is facing in his journey to get home? And you want to notice kind of how he is responding to those challenges. So if we look on page 460, there is that example. We are going to be working together to examine the theme of that we are all tested by life challenges. So we all have challenges that kind of affect us in a way of life. Currently, we are all going through the same life challenge with this coronavirus. So as we look at the example here, we have to use details to show text evidence about how Odysseus is facing the test of he's being tested by life challenges in his way home. So one thing is, what are some challenges that he's facing from others? So we know that his warriors, or the men that he's in charge of, invaded Athena's temple, which have caused some issues for him in getting home. Because of that, then he also has some challenges from Zeus, Poseidon, and Athena. They have all now have the powers to affect his chances of getting home. And then we also know that on the first island they came across, we had the islanders, and how he had the challenge then of trying to get his 3 men back onto that ship. And then we also come across now the challenge of this monster in the cage, or in the cave, which ends up being the Cyclops. So some feelings or thoughts that Odysseus will struggle with. So not only does he have the problems with others, he might have some for himself. We find out that his curiosity kind of gets the best of him. So that's a big struggle for him. He's a very curious person. So instead of continuing on his journey home, he decides to figure out what lives on this second abandoned island. And then he also has that struggle with how can he, since he's the one in charge, get home safely with all these warriors. Okay. Then, so those would be some examples that would support that theme of we are all tested with life's challenges, because I'm sure that we all have people that might affect or might do something that might affect us in getting home. We might have others that create problems, or we might have others that tempt us or get in our way by distractions. Then the next part, there's a few questions on the bottom. So kind of, in what ways do the characters' personalities make problems worse? So his warriors are just as curious and don't exactly always follow the rules. But he's able to kind of overcome those personalities in a sense that he is very smart and resourceful when it comes to solving these problems. And then he's overcoming the challenges by being that smart, confident person that he will succeed in getting home. He's able to trick his warriors back onto the boat. Think of how he was able to navigate through that storm to make sure that his men were safe. And then the last question I'm going to wait on answering just because it's going to be part of your questions for today. So what you are going to be doing is you're going to be doing the same type of thing. You are going to be going through and you are going to find a universal theme that is different from the example that I just did with the life challenges. So again, you can focus on those challenges from the book. They stated that you can kind of focus on courage, power of love, danger of greed, anything along that line. But what you're going to do is you are going to, for question number 1, write your theme. So what is another lesson that is being learned in the Tales from the Odyssey? And then you're going to complete the chart, kind of like I did in the example there. Find at least 2 examples. So what are some challenges of others? And kind of what are Odysseus's words and actions when addressing those that kind of relate to the theme. And then explain how the evidence in your chart illustrates the importance of the theme. So if you are picking your theme, why is this evidence important to the theme? How is it supporting? And then kind of how is Odysseus overcoming the problems with others and himself related to your theme? And then what might be some ways in which Odysseus responds to the problems? And then how does that suggest about how people can or should deal with challenges? So think of the problems that he is facing. Think of how he is able to handle that. Does that tell us how we can or should deal with challenges? Think of the boat in the storm. Did they start panicking and jumping off the ship to try to get to safe lands, or did they kind of stick it out through his leadership and survive? So kind of think of, even though he has these problems, what does that suggest to us on how people can or should deal with challenges? You probably have some great examples right now to go with that. And then the last one is just kind of the essential question relating back to that. What has this retelling has taught us about what drives people to explore? So you can use examples there to support your answer. So if you have any questions, please make sure that you're reaching out to me, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow.